So a lot of you that are just getting into Blender have probably been watching some tutorials online, mine included, where guys are just going crazy using box cutter and hard ops, doing all kinds of cool stuff very fast. But if you're just getting into Blender and that's the only software you have at this moment, it doesn't really help you as much because it's not all the vanilla tools, right? So this video, I just want to talk about setting up and configuring Blender with shortcuts, hotkeys, quick favorites, whatever, to make it a lot more efficient and a lot faster to work with. So we're going to head over to Blender 4.2. This is fresh install basically. And what we're going to do here to get started is I like to just customize certain things like the user interface. I'm going to show you that here as well. But we're going to change things around as far as like shortcuts go and do some quick favorites that'll just speed you up tremendously. That's the main idea. So first, I don't like this stuff at startup. So we're going to get rid of some things. I don't use the grid floor personally, but if you want it, you can, leave it on. Statistics is huge because this allows you to count your vertices just by selection. So when you're in edit mode and you select things, you can see we now have a vertex count. So we don't have to worry about counting anymore. Relationship lines are a little bit distracting. I turn them off personally. Wireframe's a huge one. You'll want to right click this, assign it to some kind of shortcut more than likely. I use my mouse, the back button on my mouse. So now I can just flick on wireframes on and off as needed. Super useful, right? As far as shading goes, a lot of people just work with matte caps. You can download matte caps. We're going to use the ceramic one for now. Backface culling, cavity, set it to both, ridge off, okay? And I personally turn outline off as well. So the trick with backface culling is if you delete a face, you'll see that now there's no interior to it. Backface culling is on by default. So, or backface culling is off by default, should I say. So most game engines don't display this way. This is double-sided rendered basically. You turn that on. This is the way most game engines will look. And this is just a good habit to work this way because then you'll start to understand when you take your models over to a game engine, it's like not looking right. Well, this is why usually is the case anyways. All right, so with that out of the way, we've kind of ran through this and we ran through this a little bit. We're probably going to do more, who knows, in that area. But let's go ahead and go to preferences. And so in preferences, we have some options in here. One of my big ones is key map, tab for pie menu. And so the normal behavior is that when you hit tab, you go in and out of object mode or edit mode. But you'd have to hit control tab to bring up a pie menu to jump into sculpt mode and all that. I just turn it on by default. So you hit tab for pie menu. When you hit tab, you can go in and out of edit mode, object mode, weight painting, vertex painting. So you can get to everything you need to get to. And this is extremely important because sometimes when you're modeling, you might want to go to sculpt mode, right? Sculpt mode has tools in here you can use even with your subdivision meshes or polygonal models, whatever the case. You can put that to use to take advantage of some of these tools. These are modeling tools, basically. Think of them as that, okay? Click and drag to the right. You can expand them out a little bit more. That's nice. All right, and the spacebar action, I always hit play by accident, so I'm going to hit it, set it to tools, and drop that down, so that way I don't accidentally start playing the animation timeline. But if I ever need it, it's there. I can just bring it back real quick. All right, and so that's the big ones there. The color picker for doing materials, I don't care for the square, or excuse me, for the circle one. You can go to interface and change it from circle to square SV plus H if you want. You'll get this one instead. I personally like this one. It can be a little goofy sometimes using it, but usually it works out just fine. You also have status bar if you ever need to see other things about your system, like how much system memory you have. It'll show up in the bottom right. Video memory, scene statistics, whatever you want in here. But that way you know if you're running out of memory or not. That's nice. And all right, so with that out of the way, I think that's the main ones. Under save and load, if you ever get a .blend1 file, that's the save version. You can turn that to 0 usually. I've had maybe 3 Blender files go corrupt over like 6 years now. So it's not really a big issue on my end, but if you want save versions, enables, keep save versions enabled. I set it to 0. All right. Auto save preferences, I turn it off. So anytime you're adding shortcuts or hotkeys or quick favorites, right? You have to come back and you have to force commit, save your preferences. So anytime you change preferences, you have to come back and save it. All right, with that out of the way, you can now hit tab, go into tab for pie menu, go into edit mode, or press AF, fill everything. And all right, so we're back at this point now, right? And as you're orbiting, huge speed improvement here is just hold Alt. You can jump into the different top and bottom views. You can also like gesture use it. So Alt middle click while moving. You can jump in and out very quick just by orbiting. If you ever get stuck in orthographic, little button here, you can get it back to perspective basically, right? Okay, so now where's the main speed improvements going to be? Under the modifier panel, perhaps we might add some modifiers, but also up over here, there's certain things you're going to be doing repetitiously over and over and over again. So like set origin points. So set origin to geometry, huge one, right click it, add it to quick favorites. Origin to 3D cursor, add it to quick favorites. And there's any number of things in here we might want, like such as align objects, right click, assign it to quick favorites. So you're going to start building your own menu, basically, your own quick favorites menu. That's the main takeaway from this video is quick favorites, but we're going to get into some more complicated stuff too. But that's one of the big ones, right? So if you want to do like a parenting, but you don't want to reach across the keyboard and hit P all the time, you right click, you add it to quick favorites. Okay. Now the idea that the primary setup here, what you're trying to do anyways, is try to use Blender like you're gaming almost, where you're using like WASD keys and then you're using your mouse. You're not trying to reach across the keyboard all the time to make things happen, right? Like that's the big problem. When you have to take your hand and lift it up off the mouse and go do something, it slows you down tremendously because you're going to have to do that a lot, right? And so anytime you can find a way to remap something to the left side or on a macro on your mouse or something like that, that's what you usually want to do. All right, with that out of the way, so we have some things already added to this. All right, and whatever you find that you keep using repetitiously, add it to your quick favorites. That's the easiest thing I can say right there. When we go into, before we go in edit mode, modifiers. So you can go to your modifiers and like say you do a lot of booleans, you add it to quick favorites. You do a lot of bevels, you add it to quick favorites. You do mirrors, quick favorites, maybe solidify, whatever else you find useful that you constantly use. Normals, weighted normal perhaps. So you can fix shading issues a little bit with that one. Maybe you want to do like the wireframe, who knows? Depends on what you're doing. Okay, so with all that out of the way, let's go to edit mode now. There's some things in edit mode that you might want to change as well. Usually, quick favorites are going to be a lot of selection methods. It tends to work out well, but I like to use them on shortcuts if possible as well. I use macros on my mouse. You're going to notice something like select more, select less. Okay, where is it? Oh, right here. More or less right here. Control number pad plus, control number pad minus, right? So I set up control number pad plus, control number pad minus as a macro on my mouse. So I always have this available to me. And so one of my additional buttons there, I can always grow or shrink my selections. A little hard to tell here what's going on with this one, but I'll subdivide it a few times. You can see we can grow selections, shrink selections, right? So just keep that in mind. If this one you can find a home for it on either quick favorites or a short, or actually a hotkey would probably work out best. If you can remap your mouse, do that. However, you might not be able to with your current mouse. I highly recommend just getting a mouse with more buttons on it. As many buttons as you can find, maybe, who knows? It can save you a lot of time. So you'll have to install the mouse software to do the macros more than likely. Now, with this out of the way, so that'll take place in the software over there, not here in Blender necessarily. But with this out of the way, what we can do is we can start adding these too. Like if we want to select mirror, we can add this to quick favorites perhaps, right? But we can do other things like under mesh. I'm going to do symmetrize first, add to quick favorites. Now we'll do selection methods. We're going to do maybe select mirror, add to quick favorites, select check or deselect, select loops, edge rings, inner loop regions, boundary loops. Okay. So those are going to be some of my primary ones that I use. And that's so when you say control shift click, you can select like this, right? Where you do like a little grid patch or shortest path selection fill region is what it's technically called. But now I can do this and hit Q, and this is where your quick favorites live, right? Select boundary loop, boom, right? So if we make selections real quick, like with vertices like this and say, do something like that. Now we can just hit Q and we can select loop inner region, boom. You see? And so this is how you speed up with modeling in Blender. Basically having more control over your selections is helpful. You can also add other things too, so you don't have to like hit Control L every time maybe. When you're in like object mode, sometimes you want to do, yeah, you see like Control L right here. Like we can link materials, object. Okay, maybe you assign that to quick favorites too, right? So now you have all of this kind of lining up in here. And in edit mode, I think the biggest speed improvement that you'll ever get is by doing inset, right? So when you have like a face selected, you see like insets like I. So you always have to go across the keyboard and hit I. If you right click this one, change the shortcut to W. This is something that I don't really see in any videos, but W is huge because now you got, like, if you select something, you hit E, you can extrude, but now you can hit W and inset. And if you didn't know this, inset, if I hit W to inset and I hit control now, we can also do it like this, right? So we can inset and push it out at the same time. So it's almost like extrude along normals. So you can literally grab a face, hit inset and hold control and do basically an extrude, right? So you don't have to always use extrude. You can just hit W most of the time now. So you want to do that and hold, you see, very quick, fast, easy way of working. It's a lot of fun. So with that in mind though, there are some other things you might want to do. Build that back up a little bit real quick. So now we have the ability to inset, but you might want to merge a lot, right? So merging at center and merging at last is my two favorite. And I'm going to show you a little trick about this one. We're going to get into the key map section and customizing things. It goes a little bit further, like I said, a little bit more advanced. Key map, we can look for merge, for example. See merge down, merge down, merge down. Oh, sorry. That's not what we're looking for. Let's assign the shortcuts first. Merge at center. I'm going to right click, assign a shortcut. Okay, I'm going to hit Shift 1. And merge at last, assign a shortcut. I'm going to hit Control 1. All right. Now, so when we use these, Shift 1 or Control 1, nothing happens right now. Okay, like literally nothing's working. So why? That's in key map. If we look up key binding, and we say Control 1, Control CTRL space 1, and we'll see that we have two things assigned to it. We got select and merge now. Get rid of the select. Okay. You could do the same thing for Shift 1, right? You'll see 2 under mesh. Get rid of that first one. Just keep the merge. And so now when you're working, like let's say we want to collapse all of these vertices to this point back here, we would normally press M, merge at last, right? Well, now we just control click and control 1, right? Control click, control 1. And so we can optimize mesh much faster this way by doing this. Now you can alt click these here, perhaps control X them. We can dissolve them. So we can work things a lot faster that way. We can also merge at center by doing things like this, right? So very simple, easy way of doing that. And there we go, right? So merging is now set up more proper. So some of you guys that were asking about that, where how do you use merge as a hotkey? You can, okay? But you have to, in this case, using those shortcuts, you have to reassign some things. And so anytime you want to assign something to a shortcut, but it doesn't work, it's probably got a conflict. That's the main thing. You'll have to go check it and make sure it's working right. All right, now it gets even better. So most of you are probably aware of the knife tool. We're working on a mesh using the knife tool. You can hit A and it'll line up by angle, but it'll be 30 degrees by default. The actual shortcut is to press something like 5 and now it'll be 5 degrees, right? I don't like hitting 5 every time. It's annoying. So what I'm going to do is go to key map, look for the knife tool, which is the K key. You'll see here, we can change it automatically to be 5-degree increments. We can also turn on angle measurements or distance as well. I just use angle, but you could do that for that perhaps. But maybe like on inset, you can see W key inset. I like to use edge rail. When you're doing things like bevels, maybe we could take a look under Control B. And in here, you can change some things around too. I personally like using width. That's just a preference. But the other one that you for sure probably will want to change is outer emitter. Set it to arc. So every time you do a bevel, it will now use arc instead, right? So when we take a look, we can start to combo these together. And I'm going to use that make cube tool real quick. This thing's super fantastic for just drawing on a shape real quick. You can hold Alt to go in both directions after drawing it out, right? So if we want to do a Boolean, you know, we could take something like this. And now we can hit Q, use a Boolean, and we can do, oops, do a Boolean actually. And then we can use a mouse drop or a mouse dropper icon thing, and we can do the Boolean. This doesn't disappear. It doesn't act like other software. Okay. Press M, move it to a new collection, call it cutters. Okay. Once you do that, you can press 1. It will hide everything but the first collection. Okay. So if you ever need to recall this, like you hit 2, it hides everything but the second. 1 hides everything but the first, and so on and so forth if you had more collections. Now, if you hit Shift 2, however, it will bring back that second collection. Shift 2 will hide it again. So Shift 1 does the same thing for the first collection. Now, so we can hit Shift 2, we can hide it. We can see we got this going on. We want to add a bevel. We can do that. Here's the thing, as you can see, it's nice to be on your modifier panel here, so that way you can see what's going on as you're using them, and you can adjust them, but you can add them just very quick on this menu instead of using this drop down perhaps. This is where outer emitter arc exists. I just wanted to show you the modifier, but we already did it for the actual bevel, control B bevel method, right? You can see here, it looks terrible. Set it to arc. Just don't forget that one, right? All right, now, so we have the knife tool customized, insets customized, all this stuff's customized for the most part. And this is what's fun about it, is now that we've done all this, like we can kind of go through here and we want to just start doing any kind of modeling or booleans or whatever the case. We are free to start just working like crazy people and just have a lot of fun making whatever it is that we want to design or create or make, basically. So now you can just speed up. I'm just giving you kind of a little demo here. Once you understand these keys, these shortcuts, how you're going to utilize them, perhaps, it's a lot more fun. Also, huge speed improvement here as well. Use vertex snapping when just doing general modeling. If you're doing modular pieces, perhaps work on the grid. Blender 4.2, it's a little bit messed up. Go to an older version of Blender, perhaps, until they fix that grid issue. But the where it doesn't snap, or it snaps, but it doesn't snap at like 10 centimeter increments, which slows you down kind of bit, a good bit anyways. So, but yeah, so now we could just start going through this and start using our tools as needed. So like when you want to fill, you can press F, and we'll now have the speed or the ability to work with speed anyways in ways we want, perhaps. Because like maybe we like this a lot. So let's do a mirror modifier. In our mirror, we can bisect and get out of that tool because we're not using it right now. And so, boom. Right. So this is what I'm getting at here with this whole video. I just wanted to get you to this point where now you can start to see like this all starts to, well, just work. Basically, that's the main thing, right? It's not that add-ons do speed you up, and that's what you'll probably end up doing next as you get more used to working in Blender. You're probably going to start wanting to use add-ons at a certain point. And it does a lot of the same stuff. A lot of those add-ons are similar. It works in similar nature, perhaps. But it does speed you up in some ways. Like, for example, if we weren't using the mirror modifier and I was in edit mode, I select everything with A, and I want to do mesh, and I want to do a symmetrize, right? So like we can symmetrize, but I got to make sure I'm doing positive X and negative X and symmetrize. You can see we got to adjust it every time we go in a different direction. So positive X and negative X still works, yes. But when you have something like Mesh Machine add-on, you just literally hit the shortcut for it and you can gesture to symmetrize. You don't have to tweak any value in the little bottom left window necessarily. So it's definitely faster. That's all I'm getting at. And so as you work more and more in Blender and you start working on more and more complicated projects, you're probably more than likely, turn these off in edit mode, probably more than likely you're going to start looking into those add-ons at that point. Also, if you're just getting into the software and you just happen to come across this video, you do need additional software to make things in Blender at least somewhat efficiently. So the main one that I'm going to recommend, everybody doesn't really want to admit this, but painting materials in Blender is really bad. Like if you're trying to do, like you can do masks for material blends, but like using layered materials inside of Blender is not that great compared to working in something like Unreal Engine. But anyways, so like Substance Painter is the way to go when you're trying to set up materials on a surface and painting it onto the surface anyway. So Substance still has its place, even though Blender's more than likely, there's some add-ons that are getting very close to being able to do what Substance does, but it's not quite there yet. And so definitely want to check into getting something like Substance Painter at some point as you want to do more texturing. You can do stylized texturing here in Blender very easily. It's not the end of the world. But so companion software wise, Substance Painter is a huge one. If you want to look into Substance Designer, that's another thing you can look into. But we'll talk about that in another video perhaps. But Substance Painter and some kind of photo editor. And it could be Photoshop, GIMP, Krita, Affinity Photo. It doesn't matter. Some kind of photo editor. So you can do graphics and some basic preliminary like texture work or hand making displacements or whatever you want in the photo editors. So you're going to want to use a photo editor and more than likely Substance. That's all I'm saying. I'm going to leave it at that. All right. And I got Symmetrize at the top right now. Right. So yeah, can you do this? Absolutely. That's the cool thing about Blender is like you can pretty much do whatever you need to do in vanilla Blender. I use this software for years like this, so it's not like it's incapable. Like you just have to take the time to learn these keys and get around it. And, you know, when you want to, knife cut something, you hit K and Y and A twice if you want to line to that edge. You want to go across X, right? And then grab it all and symmetrize it, and then grab all this, Control Shift clicking through it. Maybe use C to use a cursor selector, which is huge. Delete that. Selection, like I was saying, selection and manipulation is probably like the biggest part of 3D modeling, in my opinion. Even when you're doing something, you can see I'm almost always in my videos, at least I'm on select box. So I can just use the select box and hold shift or control and shift or whatever to do whatever selections I need here. And control clicking, sorry, control shift. Anyways, yeah, you can deselect with control. Huge one, Alt Z, obviously get in and out of X-ray so you can go across the mesh, not just in parts of it, right? And so that's cool, but what happens when you need like a specific selection somewhere and it's really hard to get a hold of it, right? Control right click. You can do this number too, if you didn't know that. So that's a fun one to think about there, right? Or in some cases, you just select more, until it works out basically, right? Or select less, right? And so ES, you can see you can extrude like whole sections sometimes, which is kind of interesting. In our case, it didn't work out too well. If we press E and scale, you see it does like this weird number. I don't want to do that. Let's do AM merge by distance, make sure it was all good. I'm going to show you one thing about inset real quick. If we were to inset and we hit B, we'll get this result instead. Now we can hold control. We can do that. So insetting, and that turns on a boundary or turns off boundary anyways. So insetting is super powerful in a lot of ways. It just lets you do kind of crazy edits sometimes that normally you wouldn't probably think of. And that's why I wanted to show you that one so bad anyways. Right? Anyways, you keep going with this at a certain point and you'll have fun with it. Like you'll be able to just start making pretty much anything you need. The only thing I would highly recommend is that if you're going to enable any add-ons that are, they're going to be in the extension section now that are like the open source ones that are used to come with Blender anyways. Loop tools, huge thing for hard surface modeling and working with mesh in general. But bool tools as well could be useful. It's much faster to do booleans with bool tools than it is to ever use the modifier and hitting the eyedropper every time, You just do it with control number pad plus or control number pad minus by doing selections, right? So at some point you will want to start exploring your extensions, right? You gotta allow online access. Hopefully it loads up, and it doesn't, of course. While I'm doing the video, it doesn't. Normally it will. And then you would look up bool tools or loop tools and so on and so forth, right? And don't be afraid of using older versions of Blender either. I mean, this is something that you'll see quite common with game artists is that they stick with just random versions of Blender for some reason. Don't ask me why, but it's some add-ons work in some versions, some versions, or excuse me, some add-ons don't work in some versions. And so you end up in this situation where if you need a certain tool that's in an add-on that's no longer supported, you might have multiple copies of Blender just to use a tool, which not my favorite thing about the software for sure, but it's something I've started doing myself, and I can kind of understand why a lot of other people do it. So you can see how we can solidify. Let's do that up here. Make it larger, and then we'll add a bevel. And now we can add 2 segments and maybe change the size a little bit if it'll let us. No, it's not going to. Change the angle amount to 55 maybe. See? Does this give us exactly what we want? No, it did not. But this is getting into some other territory when it comes to 3D modeling now. But anyways, yeah, you can do all kinds of crazy stuff with modifier setups and shrink wraps and all kinds of other things later on. So I'll leave you at this. I hope you enjoyed this video. You learned something. Realize that, like, hey, all that crazy stuff that you see online, it's not as crazy as you thought, because this is like with 90% of them, I'd say the add-ons, all they're doing is just customizing things in little small ways like this, right? And they do speed you up a good bit. So you see now I got to switch the direction. Yep. And so just have fun modeling. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll check out the next one.